Hello, my name is Xavier Baten. I am a professor in reward and sustainability at Vlerick Business School, and it is my pleasure to present you the results of our CEO Motives survey. This survey, this study, we have been doing together with business leaders, which is a network for CEOs, which is an international network for CEOs, which focuses a lot on accelerating improvement in general and in management styles. Now, the focus of our study and the underlying research question, in fact, was what drives CEOs? At Vlerick Business School, we do lots of research and also a yearly study on CEO remuneration, but we were thinking remuneration, but also other aspects of motivation, being extrinsic and intrinsic ones. What are the most important ones driving CEOs? And I will guide you through the results of this study. Now, first of all, we are very glad that we have a sample of 950 CEOs. I think this is one of a few studies with such a large number of CEOs participating. So I really would like to thank them for that, and also thank business leaders for their help in this respect. What is also interesting to know is that if we take a look at the sample, there is a nice spread over different types of organizations, being family business, being listed firms, being private equity owned firms, and also on the level of size. For example, you see that we have 282 CEOs participating of companies with less than 50 employees, but we also have 153 CEOs working in companies employing more than 500 employees. So there is a very nice spread. So I think we can say that it is quite a representative sample of CEOs and how they see things. Um, First of all, let's focus on how satisfied are they with their, let's call it, labor conditions in general, being financials and non-financials. And if we focus at first on the non-financials, we see that they are most satisfied with, in fact, their pride to work for the organization. So they are very proud to work for their organization. They are also happy with the ethical standards of the company, so the ethical norms on which the company operates. Also, the values, their own values, and the values of the company they work for are quite well aligned. They also feel quite some challenge in their job. And last but not least, also the collaboration with the colleagues in the senior management is very good. So that is very much the positive side. However, there are also some points of attention, being mainly 3 points of attention. The first one being the acceptance of change by the organization. So what we see, in fact, is that quite a lot of the CEOs in our sample have the feeling that they are front runners and that it is not always easy to bring the organization with them in the story of change. And I think that's a general human thing. We know that people are not very in favor of change in general, and that's also what the CEOs feel. What we also see is that the time which is spent on travel from work to home and at the different locations, subsidiaries, and so on, that they are not that satisfied with that, which is, I think, also something which is generally known as traffic jam problems and so on and so forth. And last but not least, they are not that satisfied with the quality of the target setting by the board. So the CEOs also receive their targets in theory from the board or the shareholders, and apparently they have some big question marks on the quality of the target setting. If we compare this with the broader group of employees, I think we see in general a rather bad feeling on the performance management systems, how they are being operated today. And for that reason, you see that quite some companies are changing. So that is the feeling, the satisfaction feeling with the non-financial rewards. Moving to, let's call it, the core and the key question being what really drives CEOs. What we have found there is that you see at the right-hand side, pay satisfaction, distributive justice, procedural justice, while pay satisfaction is the satisfaction with the pay levels. The distributive justice is satisfaction with pay compared with the efforts, compared with the performance of the CEOs. And procedural justice is the feeling they have about the process which is used to determine pay. But you see in general that these things are not important. So we can give a clear answer to the question, Are CEOs driven by money? Well, our answer is very clearly no. But what they are driven by is very clearly the non-financial rewards. That's really the number one, and also the ambition. So let's call it that the non-financial rewards are factors which are external to the CEO and which are managed and done by the organization. And the ambition really comes from inside the people. So it's the combination of the two. I will come back on which non-financial rewards drive CEOs. What we also see, and I think that is an interesting finding also, is that age has, and job seniority, a slightly, okay, it's a slight one, but a positive impact on work engagement, meaning that it is not the case that the older CEOs become the higher tenure they have in the organization, that they would become less productive. That is not at all the case. So to summarize, what drives CEOs? Not the financial rewards, but clearly the non-financial rewards. And then, of course, the question becomes, within those non-financial rewards, what are the key drivers? And here the answer is, well, there is clearly a top three. The number one being challenge. So CEOs are mainly driven by challenge. That is the ultimate answer to that question. On number two and three, they are also significant, but less important compared with challenges, is the feeling that they have to move forward in their job, and also the pride to work for the organization. So that is the picture we have today. And it's worth to mention that on the fourth place, we have the ethical standards of the company. So CEOs are mainly driven by challenge, followed by the feeling to move forward in the job and the pride of the organization, as well as the ethical values and standards of the organization. That is the case. What is also interesting is to take a look at the other side of the spectrum, being what drives less, what are less important drivers of work engagement. And here we see that job security is clearly less important, that the whole issue of travel is less important, but also that recognition is less important as a driver for work engagement. And that is in fact where we see a clear difference with other employees, because we see that for other employees, recognition really plays a key role in their work engagement. That is not the case with these CEOs. It's not easy to find explanations for that. Maybe it has to do with personality, that those people do not really need that recognition. Maybe there are other factors, but I think it's an important finding. What is also interesting to know is that there is a difference between men and women as far as the drivers are concerned. Men are very strongly driven by what I already mentioned, challenge and so on, whereas for women, female CEOs, the key driver is the collaboration with the team members, with the other members of the top management. So for them, that is very much key. So you see that there are quite some differences, clear differences, depending on the gender of the people. So that was related to the non-financials. That was related to the satisfaction with the non-financials and what drives work engagement. If we take a look at the financials, however, we see some points for potential improvement. And we see that the feeling CEOs have about their pay compared with what other companies pay in the market, they have a rather bad feeling about that. And that is something which is related to distributive justice. Also, other elements of distributive justice, remuneration in relation to the work done, remuneration related to the contribution and performance, they have less well feeling about that. So that means that in general, that issue of relative fairness in pay is key and is not scoring that well. In our study, we have also been looking for potential clarifications for that, potential explanations for that. And we think we have found it. We have found it being the fact that only 9% of the companies do structural benchmarking. By benchmarking, I mean comparing the salaries they pay to their CEO with what other comparable firms do. That is only the case in 19% of the companies. And we have seen that in companies who do structural benchmarking, pay satisfaction clearly increases. So I think that in the specific field of financial rewards, that seems to be a key issue. And then last but not least, we also took a look at the ethical stance of the CEOs. So we have put them into a decision-making modus in two fields. The first field was, well, let's assume that you are confronted with a top salesperson in your organization who gives, let's call it, well, it's not bribes, but gives money to clients to buy the products and so on. That was the first one. And the second one is guess that you are able to find a new supplier for basic materials who delivers the materials 25% cheaper compared with other ones. And you find out that there are some issues with labor conditions with that supplier. What would you do? Based on their answers, we have been able to classify them into more ethical decision making and less ethical, and that was based on an academic on academic studies on how to measure ethics. And here we have found that 69% of the CEOs take the ethical decisions, but still 31% take less ethical decisions. So I think that is quite an important point for improvement. And maybe even more interesting is the links we have found. For example, we have found that female CEOs are more ethical compared with their male counterparts. We have also found that younger CEOs are less ethical, and I guess that is really a point of attention, and that is where, for example, also business schools should play a role in. I think that those younger CEOs are that much driven by their ambition that maybe they forget about the external impact and the ethical impact of what they do. Um, for example, we have also found this for the small history, let's say that Dutch CEOs are more ethical than Belgian ones. And last but not least, also a very important finding is that the KPIs which are included in the bonus have an impact on ethical behavior, meaning that if the focus is strongly on financial KPIs like profitability, then CEOs will be more inclined to take less ethical decisions. And that is also a very important point of attention. So these are the main results of a very large study we have done with 950 CEOs about what really drives CEOs and how ethical CEOs are. I really thank you for your attention.